For those of you that are new to this session, I guess I better start from the beginning and do things the way you're supposed to do, not be a guy. All right. Now you're all here as part of Money Smart Week, and this is a disclaimer or disclosure that I have to read to you. Okay. My name's Bernie Wrezinski. I'm with the Foundation for Financial Education. It's a nonprofit organization that works throughout the United States. It's made up of all volunteers. I don't get anything for doing this. I've been involved in the financial services industry for 35 years. I'm a member of this community. The community's been very good to me, and it's a way of me being able to give back some of what I've learned and some of the experiences that I've had over the years, hopefully to empower you and your families to be able to make decisions about finances that will reduce your taxes, help you cope with inflation, help you with issues such as probate, long-term care. Those are all things that the foundation helps people make decisions about. And you folks are here for an estate planning event. Welcome. And tonight's class is one of hundreds of free financial education events that are occurring all over the country in connection with Money Smart Week, created by the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago. Financial institutions, government agencies, nonprofits, libraries, and schools are joining forces to raise awareness about financial education and provide resources to the public at large. Because this is a Money Smart Week event, all content will be void of sales pitches and will not refer to my company's organization or products or services unless used as an example or asked about by participants. Each of you has a short survey. We ask that you take a few minutes at the conclusion of the class to provide some feedback about today's discussion, as well as how you heard about us. This information is very important to maintain quality and determine the best ways to inform you of next year's event. Please note that there is also an email address and website should you want to submit additional comments online. Lastly, you have a sign-up sheet if you wish to be informed about future Money Smart Week campaigns as well as free financial education activities throughout the year. As with the Money Smart Week events, you will not be solicited or marketed any products by signing up. If you'd like to be added to the email list, please check the box to the left and complete your contact information at the bottom. You may also check the Follow Up With Me box if it's okay for Money Smart Week coordinators to contact you in the future to complete a post-survey event and/or help with next year's promotional efforts by informing others about how you or your family benefited from what you learned during Money Smart Week. Okay, we're off and running. This is what their evaluation form looks like, and the foundation is requesting that you fill out a evaluation for those. Jim just gave you one. I don't have one up here. It's this one right. Can I borrow yours? Okay, it's this one right here. The foundation has about between 30 and 40 different workshops that they have for people in organizations. We do those workshops at no cost to the organization or any of the participants. And if, as a result of your attendance here tonight, if you're part of an organization or know of an organization that might benefit from having a workshop, let us know. Jim will get you the information that they need to have us invited into that organization. Okay, estate planning. What is your estate plan? Does everybody have one? What is one? What's an estate? What does estate planning do for you? Does it save money? Is a will or not a will the best thing for you? Okay. Your estate is your stuff. And for each of us, it's different. And getting it to the next generation as efficiently and at as low a cost as possible is very, very important. Unless it's not important to you. Okay? So what does estate planning do for you? That's what estate planning does for you. It helps make your wishes known about how you want your assets to proceed to the next generation or to the organization of your choice. All right, Jima? Who needs an estate plan? Most people who are young think it's just for us old codgers. Okay? But there are a lot of young people dying. And it's been my experience that an estate plan, although is very important for those of us who are in that freedom phase of our lives, that it's very important for young people to have one too. So I see a lot of people here who are retired or near retirement, and as a result of this, you may want to have a discussion with your family about estate planning, particularly for them. Because if something should happen, divorce, death, to parents of young children, or if they have special needs children, all right, the state will have a great deal of control in what happens if they don't have the proper documentation in place. So it's very, very, very important. What happens if I die without a will? Most of you probably have a will, don't you? If you die without a will, something happened. What happens, that event is called dying intestate, without a will. And the state of Illinois has a will for you. And it will be administered through the state. Now, as part of the foundation, if you do not have a will, we will provide a will for you at no cost to you. So even if you may have a will, and if as part of your estate planning you think that a will is what needs to be, is the tool that you want to use for your estate plan, fine. But you may have a relative, a child, that doesn't have a will. Put it down on your evaluation form, and we'll get a will packet to them and help them complete it. It's a state-compliant will. We're not attorneys, okay, but we can help you decide whether or not you need an attorney on your will. Go ahead.
In a state, a will or a trust? I mean, I live in the state of Illinois, I have those things now. In the state of Illinois, I moved to Tennessee. Do I have to do those things over again?
You're going to get asked to move to the head of the class because of the questions you asked. That's a great question, okay? And that is really important because some people who are retired, well, it doesn't even have to be retired, but let's say you own property in California and you pass away and your state of residence is Illinois. What do? You need to see an attorney, okay? Not just assume that everything's going to work out all right, okay? But generally speaking, the trust work that is done in Illinois, if you live here and you move to Tennessee, generally speaking, the states have reciprocity and honor the provisions of the trust that was made in the prior state, okay? But that's not always the case. So again, if that is something that you're contemplating doing, you know, it's just a 20-minute conversation with an estate planning attorney to ask that, and it's almost no expense whatsoever. In fact, if that is an issue in your life and you write that down on your evaluation form, I can probably get an attorney to answer that question for you pro bono. Okay? All right, but that's a great question. Yep. All right. Any other questions? I kind of go through this kind of quick. I'm sorry for that. These workshops usually take, they're scheduled to go for like 45 minutes to an hour, but generally speaking, questions come up, and they'll take an hour and a half sometimes, and that's okay with me, but it's not okay with the money smart people because there are people moving in here after us, okay? So I got to kind of move along, okay? So getting started, taking an inventory. You know, the hardest part about living on a budget is taking a look at what's going on in your life financially. And it's the same thing about an estate plan. So many people put that off and put that off and put that off and put that off. And it doesn't have to be that way because the earlier you start, the easier that it is. All right? A family meeting. I grew up in a family where you didn't talk about any of that stuff. You did not talk about money. That is one thing you did not talk about with mom and dad. Okay? Just didn't happen. I never heard my grandparents talk about money with my parents. It just didn't happen. But you know what? You're working your entire lives, and some of you are accumulating some pretty wonderful estates. And if you don't have the discussion and talk about the options that are available, there is somebody waiting in line that will very happily take as large a portion of your estate as you're willing to let them have, and that is the IRS. Okay? And that's the number one reason to do estate planning, other than the efficiency of that as proper estate planning provides for when you finally pass away. And some of you may have some real issues as far as you either want control of money or need to have control of the money you leave behind. And through proper estate planning, you can do that. All right? Or you may have a family dynamic that demands that you do estate planning. All right? Not everybody may get along. All right? And you, having accumulated this estate, you want to see that it gets passed on in as efficient a way as possible with as little contention as possible. These are all variables that come up in a family. But having a family meeting, what are you going to do about long-term care? What happens if one of you has a stroke? Or one of you passes away, and then the other one gets sick? Have you had that discussion with your kids? It's really, really important. 80% of nursing home admissions are women. And 50% of us that reach age 65 are going to spend some time in a nursing home. Which half of the room do we want? They're about evenly divided. Okay? You'll stay home with your kids, and they're going to feed you 3 nice square meals a day, and we're all going to go to a nursing home over here, and we're going to get filled up on carbohydrates and gravy every day. All right? Now, there are some wonderful nursing homes. Actually, we're very fortunate in our community to have some great facilities. Are you going to do your estate planning yourself? Well, what the problem there is that you don't know what you don't know. I would guess that there's probably not a stupid person in this room. Okay, but you don't know what you don't know. And you know what else? The tax codes change constantly. The tax code is larger than the combined works of William Shakespeare, which is over 2,500 pages. And it changes constantly. How are you going to keep up with that? Overcoming reluctance. Maybe one of you wants to plan. I'm involved in consultation with a couple right now where the wife really wants to get this all worked out. They're both young professionals, very successful people. And she wants to get this worked out. And they don't have any children. They're not going to have any children. And she has definite plans about what she wants to have happen. And he doesn't want nothing to do with it. Okay? It'll happen what'll happen. I'm going to let the chips fall where they may. I don't want to talk about dying. Okay? But estate planning is more about living than it is about dying, because most of it has to do with what your wishes are while you're alive. Okay? You pass away, you two may know what each other wants as far as care in the event that one of you becomes incapacitated, and you can make decisions for one another. But you pass away and you don't have it written down and you become incapacitated, hard telling what's going on. A couple of years ago, I was working with a fella who did some estate planning, and one of the major parts of his estate planning was if he became incapacitated and had to be put into an institution, he wanted to make sure he got 2 beers a day, and he even put into his estate plan the type of beer that he wanted every day. And that's the type of control that you can have if you do your estate planning properly. Okay, let's move on here. Okay, property passing outside of a will. We've touched base on that. How is that possible? Is that a good thing to do? All right. Community property, life estates, TOD, POD, beneficiary deed, gifting, and life insurance. Okay, property passing outside of a will. If you have this, a beneficiary, many of the assets that you have, you can name a beneficiary to. It's okay, you don't need a will for it, all right? Community property, there you've got some issues. Life estates, if you have an asset that you want to pass on to your children, but, or your nieces and nephews, this is an example, but you want to make sure that your spouse is taken care of during the time and let your spouse have use of that for the rest of their life, or your child. These are all issues that come up, transfer on death and payable on death. Does anybody know it? Does everybody understand what those two tools are? Okay, it's really important that you do, because you see, probate is a real big deal. It can be a real big deal, all right? And it can be very, very exhaustive as far as finances are concerned. And if you title some of your assets can be titled in such a way that they have transfer on death or payable on death on them, and they avoid probate altogether. Now, what assets? Now, and if you want more information about that, write that down on your evaluation form, and we'll get you more in-depth information on that so that you can make decisions about those assets for yourselves. Beneficiaries, many tools allow you to have a beneficiary, which avoids probate altogether. Okay. Gifting. Some of you are going to have estates that are too big. And probably when you got married or when you started out on this journey called life, many of you, I know myself, I didn't have much of anything, but you're going to have estates that are too big. And gifting is a real powerful form, and when I say too big, it's because there are tax ramifications of having performed and done too well and participated in the American dream, whether it's working hard or winning the lottery or inheriting money. Right? And gifting can be a real powerful tool in minimizing the IRS's participation in your estate plan, because the IRS is there. Life insurance. Life insurance is a really powerful tool. It's tax-free. But do you know you can lose the tax-free benefit of that if your estate's too big? All right? So that's really important, but there are ways to avoid losing that. Any thoughts or comments or questions?
Gifting, are you talking about gifting while you're alive or after?
Did everybody hear that question? This lady, what was your name? Alice, thanks Alice, good question. Alice asked the question, is gifting done while you're alive or after you pass on? Well, gifting is a strategy that is done while you're alive, basically to try, you can do it for whatever reason you want, okay? But it's basically an effort to reduce your estate. Because you know what happens, I showed this in the last workshop that we did. I guess I'll show it again in this workshop, okay? If you're a couple and you've reached age 65 together, or no, if you're a male and you've reached age 65, you have a 50% chance of making 85. If you're a female, you have a 50% chance of getting to 88. And if you've reached 65 together, you have one of you has a 50% chance of living to 92. All right, so planning your estate, and what happens because of this longevity, you know, many of us when we retire, you know, the first couple of years are filled full of excitement and doing things you never want, or that you always wanted to do, and you travel or whatever that deal is. But then, you know, as we experience this longevity in our life, our spending habits go down and we really need less money. Well, what happens? Well, if that money's not too much at risk and you're managing it well, it just starts to snowball and your estates get too big. That happens quite often. And so at that point in time, gifting becomes a real powerful tool. Okay? And you can gift in a number of different ways. Let me give you an example. Now, I'm not here selling a life insurance policy tonight at all, by any stretch of the imagination. But this is just an example of the power that gifting does. Let's say you've got 4 kids, and you've done well over the course of your lifetime. You can give each of them $13,000 a year. That's $52,000. Okay? Now, you could take that money and gift that money to them, buy a life insurance policy, depending upon your age, on your life, or on the lives of both of you, okay, if you're still married. Okay, that may be, depending on your age, $52,000 a year. Could very easily get $1 million life insurance policy for that amount of money, or even more, okay, if it's on the both of you. And that would be tax-free money. That's called the velocity of money, or leveraging your money and making your money work harder for you, because you may not need that $52,000 a year. And if you don't, that's a real powerful tool to be able to use. But again, I'm just using that as an example. I'm not trying to promote any particular policy or product. That is just an example of one of the things that gifting can do. Go ahead.
What's the difference between transfer on death and payable on death?
Another great question. I meant to cover that. Okay, when I was going over that, I said, I better tell them the difference between this. Depending on the type of asset that you have is whether or not it's transfer on death or payable on death. All right, if you have money in a brokerage account, it has to be TOD. Okay, on a piece of real estate, and Illinois just became sort of a transfer on death state, which means that you are payable. Yeah, and on real estate, it's transfer on death. But like on CDs and things like that, you put payable on death. Now that doesn't mean they have any control over that asset. That just means that it goes to them immediately upon your passing. That's different than joint tenancy. Okay, if you have assets that are in joint tenancy with your kids, you need to seek some good solid advice on what the ramifications are of that. Okay, it's not necessarily a bad idea, but it's a bad idea. Okay, I mean, it's a tool that you can use, but just imagine if. I'll use myself as an example. I got 2 boys, and I put my house in both of their names just to be co-owners with me. And one of them gets divorced. Or one of them hits a school bus full of nuns. I'm in big trouble. I could be out in the street, because that asset could be taken away from me because I'm opening it up to litigation because of that. That's not part of this, but okay. Any questions? Okay.
So in the example of your house, would you put your house in your will to give to your sons, or would you put your house out of the will and say payable on transfer on that?
Well, it's right now. Illinois is in the process. Go back. Illinois is in the process of becoming a POD and a TOD state. Okay, they've always been a POD, but a TOD state, and it's not quite all the way through. So if that is something that you want to do, I can get you more information on that. I don't want to be vague about it, but I don't want to give you, again, I'm not an attorney, but I do know what's going on because I sit in with them all the time, and I can get you the answer to that. But generally speaking, the answer is yes. At this point in time, any piece of real estate that's not in a trust in Illinois goes through probate, okay? But that's in the process of being changed and very soon, okay? So putting it transfer on death is what you would want to do ultimately, okay, when everything is right. Now, that doesn't give the kids any control over the asset, all right? You still have 100% of the control, and you, it's not open to litigation if they do something wrong, okay?
So then that means if you had it set up that way that it would transfer to them upon your death, but not have to go through probate.
Yes. Did everybody hear that? You said in 12 words what I said so eloquently in 550. Thank you.
So if an asset, for example, let's say a house or something is done transfer that on debt, so that becomes income for that year for the son or
Well, now again, you're able to pass on, no. Okay, you're talking about 401ks, and we'll get into that in just a second.
like probably like property.
Yeah, no, you're able to pass on whatever the estate tax exemption is, and this year it's $5 million. Okay, now it's supposed to stay at $5 million. That was part of the deal in the fiscal cliff, right? Well, they're already talking about bringing it down to $3.5 million with an eye on $1 million. And does everybody understand the ramifications of what that means? Again, whatever the estate tax is, whether it's $5 million, it's been as low as 0 recently in 2010. It's been $650,000, it's been $1 million, it's been $3.5 million, and now it's $5 million. So it's a political football, right? And one thing you can rest assured that it's going to change again. And by doing proper estate planning, you can double whatever the estate tax exemption is as long as you're a married couple. Okay? And if you want more clarification on that, write that on your evaluation form, and I will get that, because that is probably one of the most powerful estate planning tools that there is. All right, the ability to do that. We talked about the pitfalls of joint tenancy and alternatives. Go to the next slide. We talked about the pitfalls of joint tenancy and joint bank accounts, pitfalls of joint tenancy, and some of the alternatives. One of the alternatives are TODs and PODs and beneficiary designations. All right, many of you have assets that the first thing that we do, one of the first things that we do when we sit down and consult with people is we do a beneficiary audit. Okay, to make sure that the assets that you have the proper beneficiary designations on them as you would want to, because you'd be amazed at the number of ex-wives who are getting proceeds from an ex-husband from 30 years ago because somebody forgot to change the beneficiary designation on the life insurance policy. Okay, and one thing that you may want to, if you have any beneficiary designations with estate on there, you may want to reconsider that. Okay, you may want to reconsider that because it will eventually get to your heirs, but it'll go through probate and it may open itself up to another level of taxation. Okay, yeah. If, let's say I have a life insurance policy and you're my sister, okay, and I want you to have some of the proceeds of that. I want you to have the whole thing, the whole $500 life insurance policy. No, you'd be a much better sister than that. Okay, and so let's say I had a $100,000 life insurance policy, and I named you, I didn't name you the beneficiary, but I wanted it to go to you, and you were my single living heir. And I wrote down estate on there, okay? Well, it would go to my estate through probate and then to you, instead of going directly to you, avoiding probate and avoiding taxation, okay? So if you want a beneficiary audit, put that on there and we'll go through that process with you. And again, all the work that we do is complimentary. There's no cost. We're a nonprofit organization, okay? That has to do with tax exempt, okay? All right, let's talk about the next step, the basics of a will. And I've kind of been going over this as we've been going along. There's 3 parts to a will. And a lot of people, you'd be amazed at the number of people that don't want to talk about having a will, simply because we're talking about the end of life issues and the thought of dying and getting stuffed in a casket and all the other stuff that goes along with that and the end of this life. It's very uncomfortable for people. Can be, all right? Well, there's 3 parts to a will. And 2 parts have to do with what happens while you're alive. And it's very important that you make those wishes known while you're alive. And along with a will, your will, you want to make sure you have powers of attorney. Not just for health care, but also for finances. And it's real important. And it's real important that that power of attorney be limited in scope. I gave an example of that. Was it in this workshop about the lady who gave her car to her son? Okay. This is another California deal. Power of attorney. This friend of mine had these clients that lived in California, and they were sisters. And one of them was going to go to Europe for an extended period of time. So she gave her sister power of attorney for finances while she was gone, you know, to pay her bills, whatever came up, you know. Well, she came back, and she didn't own anything. Her sister took it all. It makes for an interesting Thanksgiving, wouldn't it? Okay, so there's ways that you can limit powers of attorney, and you definitely want to do that. You definitely want to do that, because once you're incapacitated, again, life is good as long as you two are together here, okay? But if you're single and you become incapacitated, it can be real serious. So health care and finances, and make sure that there are some limitations put on the power of attorney. And if you want any help with that, we can help, okay? Where do you keep your will? Who's got a will in here? And do you have the original?
Where should the original be?
It should be in your hands. But 99% of the time, what happens is, and your kids should have copies of it, okay? 99% of the time, the attorney who made up the will has got the original. Because you know what happens? That attorney gets to skip down to the courthouse and probate that will. Because you have to have the original will to probate it, okay? So that's why that happens, all right? Now, well, you have a lockbox? Okay.
And can your kids get into the law?
Well, you can give them a copy of it, and yeah, they can. There's a process that happens on your passing, okay? Because again, the IRS wants to make sure you don't have too much in there that they can't get their hands on. Okay, all right. Trust, do you need a trust? A trust is a really, really powerful tool, and it gives you control, not only while you're alive, but after you pass on. Right? And you can accomplish a lot of different things and there are a lot of different kinds of trusts. And again, one of the most powerful estate planning tools is that trust that doubles the estate tax exemption. And even though it's $5 million right now, and you may not have $5 million, we don't know what that estate tax exemption is going to be 5 years from now, or 3 years from now, or 10 years from now. But one of the things you can do is, and it's relatively inexpensive is double that estate tax exemption no matter what it is, thereby saving your heirs perhaps tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars. All right. Do you need a trust? Well, you know, my dad had Alzheimer's disease, died in 2007, and he had Alzheimer's disease for about 5 years. He was a real good patient. We only had to put him in a nursing home or a recovery unit for a couple of weeks after an episode he had in the hospital. Prior to his passing, we put everything he had in a trust. And he died on December 12th, 2007. By January 15th of 2008, all of his assets had been dispersed. Okay? But we talked earlier about some of the other issues besides dispersing of assets efficiently. You know, you may want to bequeath an institution, an alma mater, a church, a temple, a synagogue, okay, with some money, all right? Trusts are a good way to do that. And trusts are, I like to liken them to a car. You know, all of our cars are pretty much the same. They got 4 wheels and an engine and transmission. They're on a, you know, pretty similar chassis, all right? But then you can dress them up from there. You know, you can get a convertible top, you can get electric windows, you can get AM, FM. And my wife's car's got air-conditioned seats. Boy, the first time I sat on that was an awakening because I wasn't aware of that fact. But anyway, what happens if your children are married and you have assets and if they get divorced? Do you want that divorced spouse to take their share or a portion of their share of your assets? And trust can complete those tools. Now trusts are relatively, I would dare say they are extremely inexpensive in comparison to what it costs to not have one. And I don't make trusts, I don't sell trusts, I don't have anything to do with it. That's just been my experience over the last 35 years. When you take into consideration the headaches and the money that they save, the money that they cost to implement is minuscule in comparison.
What's the average cost, would you say, or does it depend on the size of the estate?
Yeah, well, more than the size of the estate, it depends more on what you want to do.
You want it real complicated, it's more.
Yeah, okay. Because sometimes you may think you only need one trust, but you might need 2 or 3. And every time. And so, you know, for most of us, under $2,000. And that gets the powers of attorneys, the pour-over will, and the trust all in one shot. Boom, boom, boom. Everything's nice and clean. Okay? It could even be as low as $750, depending on the attorney that you go with. Okay? If you want more information about that, do that. Okay. Choosing an executor. Let's go on to the next one. Okay. And I'm gonna buzz through this real quick, but choosing an executor. Now, you know, most people, if you have kids and it comes to choosing an executor for your will or for your trust, okay, they always name the responsible one, the one that got the good grades and the one that didn't go out for, you know, didn't stay out past curfew, and the one that didn't smoke, okay? But if you really got one you want to get even with, make them the executor of your will, okay? Or your trust. Because it can be it's a pretty big job, or it can be a big job depending on the extent of your trust and the desires that you wish to make known in your will or your trust, okay? You can turn it over to a trust department. You can make provisions within your trust to pay the executor of the trust if you want to. Doesn't happen all that often, but you can. Let's see. Qualities of an executor. A minor can't serve. Responsibilities of an executor. They have, you know, if they decide, well, that really wasn't Dad's wish, you know, or Mom's wish to do that. I had a conversation with them over the dinner table 2 weeks before they died, and they really meant this. They don't want that profession. Okay, they don't have the choice to do that. Okay, they have to follow that to the letter. That's a fiduciary responsibility that they have. So that's another thing that the trust does that a will doesn't, because a will can be contested.
Can you have co-executive?
Yes, sir. Another good question. You can. And is there a good reason for that? Yeah. Yeah, there are a number of good reasons for that. Okay. And just to talk about, how families get sideways, I've got a friend who's a CPA and an estate planning attorney, and a couple years ago we were talking about how families can get sideways with one another when a little bit of money pops up. And it doesn't really take that much money, all right? And this couple in Normal had died, and they had a house worth $75,000. And that's all they basically had. Okay, it was paid for. And they had 2 kids. And the kids got sideways with one another. And he said, guess how much the attorney's fees are now? $75,000. And that happens. And with proper estate planning, you can avoid that altogether. Our time is just about up. Okay? Choosing guardianship. I'll go over this very briefly and very quickly. Generally speaking, if you go home and you talk to your children about this issue and ask them what provisions that they have made for guardianship for your grandchildren, and you have that discussion with them, remember this and remind them of this. If they don't make their wishes known, some judge is gonna. And generally, they're sympathetic to the plight of the children, and they want to do what's best for the children. But only those parents really know what's going on. And so choosing the guardianship of those children is really, really important. Okay? Because most of the time, not always, but most of the time, whoever gets a guardianship gets control of the money. And that's a big deal. That's a huge deal. All right? Probate, we've talked about that, to avoid or not to avoid. In McLean County, probate's actually, by comparison to a lot of other counties and states, McLean County is pretty good about the process. They're more efficient than a lot of other counties are, and Illinois is more efficient than a lot of other states. So, but just as an example, again, we've talked about why probate is maybe an important tool for you to consider avoiding. Number one, it's public. Number two, it's costly. And number three, it's time consuming. The average estate is in probate 2.5 years. And for the most part, all of that can be avoided. And it doesn't take a lot of work. In property that avoids probate, again, many of you probably have some of the tools in place that avoid probate, but making sure that you have the beneficiaries listed properly is good. Death and taxes, federal estate tax. We've talked about that. What is included? Everything. What are you worth? Now you have state taxes on inheritances and on estates, taxes on insurance. We covered some of that. But one of the things I'm going to talk to you about real quick is your 401ks. Because some of you are sitting there going, well, I got this 401k, and I got a house. I own a cottage in northern Wisconsin, and we're living life pretty good right now. I might be worth $2-3 million, but so I don't have to worry about the estate tax. So let's talk about that 401k. Let's talk about that 401k real quick. All right, irregardless of the size of your estate, what happens to that 401k when you pass on? You've got a 401k, you got $500,000 in it, you pass away, what happens to you when you get it? Possibly, if it's still in a 401k. Okay, this is a little outside of the scope of the estate planning issue, but I feel it's integral because a lot of people who think that they're under the estate tax end up paying really egregious taxes simply because they don't know what they don't know about what happens to a 401k or an IRA. If you leave a 401k at an ex-employer without putting it into a special tool, okay, and you pass away, 20% of your $500,000 is going to go, that's $100,000, is going to go to the IRS. And it doesn't have to. That's $100,000 that you do not have the use of anymore for the rest of your life. Okay? And it doesn't have to happen. If that money is transferred into the proper estate planning tool, you pass away, that $500,000, all of it, without exception, goes to you. So that's really important. Now, let's say during the course of your lifetime, you start taking income off of that, but you manage that money really well, okay? And you pass on, and what was your name again? Janet? Barb, I'm sorry. And Barb then uses it, and she actually makes this grow. Okay, because women, we all know, are a lot smarter than us. They're so smart that they let us think we actually have some control in this world. Okay? But the truth of the matter is that women end up controlling most of the assets in our country. And that's because of that chart right there. So it's really important that you know what you don't know. I don't know what I'm saying there. Okay, but anyway, so Barb, you do a great job, and you turn that 500, you live off of that, you get some income off of it, your life goes real well, you live for X number of years, and you've turned that money into $650,000 bucks. Okay, and the estate tax exemption is still at $5 million, and you pass away, and your estate is worth $1.1 million, well under the exemption. Okay. No problem, right? How many kids do you have? You have 4 kids. All right. And let's say all 4 kids are doing pretty good. Right? And they have combined incomes in all 4 of their homes, for the sake of convenience, of $100,000 each. Okay? And you pass away, and they get a letter from the custodian of your IRA. It says, hey, you got $650,000, so what's that divided by 4? That's 1, 6. So each of them get about $165,000. They go, all right, that's great, Mom, Dad, you did good, thanks for it, okay? So what happens to that money? That $165,000 gets added to their earned income for that year. So that year, they earned $265,000. Jimma, can you bring up that tax table, please? Let's take a look at what that means to them if that happens. What that really means is that most of what they made all of what they made that day. What it really means is this, is that many of you unknowingly are setting up the IRS to be your #1 beneficiary or your #1 charity without knowing about it.
So Barb was doing well, and so she could have been rolling every year some money to a Roth, right? Some of that, so it could all be Roth at the point when she died. And if that happened, would the kids then owe anything, or could they just inherit a Roth?
You know, if you don't look out, you're going to get a star and have to sit in the front row. Yeah, no, that's great.
All right, now let's go back a little bit. Her husband is still working and putting, Barb could be the one that's
Yeah.
not be too sexist here, but anyway, so if you're an active employee, you can't be taking money from your 401k through your employer right now and putting it in something protected, or can you?
Oh, yes.
You can't.
Okay. Yes. Depends on the employer and the provisions of the plan. Now, we're really getting off track here, and I'm going to take 30 seconds to do this. But do you know if you're contributing to a 401k, in most 401ks, it says you can't have any distributions before 59 and a half unless it's emergency. Okay? You know why that is? You know, your employer can put in there, they can give you access to those assets at any time. But do you know how Wall Street gets paid? By assets under management. Okay? So when these 401ks are drawn up, the custodians just naturally throw in 50, whoops. About time for this show to be over, folks. That's all. Okay, they just naturally throw that 59 and a half in there so you can't take distributions out because then they lose control of the money. Okay? So, did you get that tax table up yet? No, the tax table. Yeah. Huh. No, I got it right here. Thanks, Lester. Okay, let me see if I can see it. All right. At between $70,000 and $100,000, you're in a 25% tax. So these kids right here are cruising along at 25 in a 25% tax bracket. They inherit your IRA or your 401k, and their income goes up to $265,000. They're now in a 37% tax bracket with a base tax of $48,000 as opposed to $9,000. And that's for each and every one of them. So roughly $200,000, over $200,000 of this is going away just in federal estate taxes. That doesn't include state and state taxes, or I mean income taxes. Okay, pardon me. All right. So our time is up. It's 6 o'clock. Each of you, the Foundation for Financial Education has teamed up with the private higher educational industry of our nation and over 300 private schools. Because of your attendance here tonight, each of you is eligible for a $500 tuition credit at over 300 private schools in our nation. If you want to access that, there's absolutely no strings attached. It doesn't cost you a nickel. It will never cost you a nickel. Okay? And last year, over 260,000 students received $25 million in tuition credits from this program. And because of your attendance here and our nonprofit relationship with this organization, you're eligible to get that. Bradley University is one of them that accepts that. So if you want more information, and there are higher amounts of tuition credits available to people. Okay.
Go back to that example right up there. How do you avoid that then? How do you give that money from your IRA to the?
That is a great question, okay? That young lady, our star pupil back here, the brown nose, the one, okay? Okay, Roth conversion is a possibility, okay? That's a real possibility, but that has to be done very carefully and with a great deal of planning because you don't want to end up paying more in taxes while you're alive on this money than you need to either. Okay, and if you don't do your Roth conversion properly, that will happen, all right? And there are ways to convert this money from always taxable money using other tax shelters to never taxable money. Okay, and if you want information about that, put that down there. Converting always taxable to never taxable, and we'll get that. I'll know what that means when you get it on there. And then also having the proper custodian. Okay, if your money isn't with the proper custodian, some custodians will let your children take required minimum distributions off of that instead of a lump sum payment. But some custodians will say, hey, we're not messing with that. You take your money and you pay your taxes on it, and we're done. Okay? So I like to talk about this a lot because it's an area where just about all of us have money, and we don't realize the long-term thinking that goes behind the IRS's strategy for our money. Do you see that? They give you a little, you know, you get out of college, you get into the workforce, and you get your first real job, and they give you a 401k. Wow, I'm on my way, which you are. And you think, man, this is great. I get a couple of little tax deductions along the way. Boom, 50, 60 years goes by, and you've been saving that money your whole life for the IRS.
And are they always changing these tax laws and everything? Like what you do today to protect yourself 5 years from now might not be protecting you?
Yep.
And so what happens to the little old lady that's 90 that really doesn't give a crap about this stuff anymore? I mean, do you then appoint somebody to take care of your stuff and so you don't have to worry about it anymore?
You can do that, or you have family discussions about it. Okay. That's a really good question, but basically what I do is I recommend that if you do implement a trust, that you have it reviewed every 3 years. Because what happens is, you go to an event like this, you get all fired up, I'm going to take care of, this is the year I'm going to take care of control of my retirement, okay? And you go out and you do it, and you do a good job, okay? Done, okay. And then the laws change. And 15 years goes by, and you acquire some assets, and oh, by the way, I forgot to put that in my trust. Oh, and I forgot to put that in my trust. And oh, I forgot to put that in my trust. And then you die, and so much is outside of your trust that the good work you did 15 years ago is negated because your estate now has to go through probate. Okay? So I always recommend that you go back to an estate planning attorney every 3 years just for a review. Okay? Takes half an hour. He or she will ask you, has anything changed? What's going on in your life? How's your health? Blah, 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 blah. Bought anything, sold anything, and you're on your way. Okay? Thanks so much. Go ahead.
What is the state inheritance tax exemption?
$4 million.
Is that gonna change?
Don't know. Don't know. Don't know. But it's $4 million, and based on the size of your estate over that, the state tax on that is about 5.5% to 16%.
How about probate? How much money can you ignore probate for? Is there an exemption for that?
No. No.
So if you have $10,000, you gotta have that probate?
I didn't hear what you said. No. If you only have $10,000, I can't imagine a scenario where that would happen.
You
But
can have 2 trusts set aside for each of you, but there may be some assets that are still jointly owned. But if that's held to a minimum, we'd be able to avoid probate.
Yeah, because what you can do is, that's a good question for an attorney, which I'm not, but based upon what you've said, okay, most trusts come along with what's called a pour-over will, and they catch whatever's not in the trust and throw it into the trust on your death to prevent that kind of stuff from happening. Okay, getting a little bit. All right, so we're done. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. You taking time out of your busy life to spend with us. And again, Jim is going to come around and get those evaluation forms. If you have any questions about anything, we'd be happy to sit down and discuss any of it with you, or get you headed in the right direction for the advice you need.